Breakthrough Weekly. I'm your host, Monica Pelayo. If you're returning, thank you for being here again. I truly appreciate you choosing to spend your time with me. And if you're new, thank you for finding this space. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Now let's get started with today's reflection. What surfaced when I reflected on my years as an executive assistant. There was a period when things slowed down, the pace softened, my calendar opened up, and I gave myself permission to reflect on the full year and the patterns that shaped it. As I looked back, things finally made sense. I could clearly see a pattern that had been present for decades, and I could see how it showed up in different stages of my life. I learned to make myself small at a very young age. In my home, it was safer to stay quiet, safer to stay out of the way, safer to not draw attention to myself. That belief didn't disappear as I got older, it adapted. Later in my career, especially during my years as an executive assistant, that same belief showed up as I was overworking. I did more, I pushed harder, I looked for recognition, validation, and acceptance, trying to become valuable enough to be chosen. Work didn't create the pattern, it simply revealed it. Seeing that connection brought clarity. What I experienced at work wasn't just about the role, it was about the continuation of a belief that had been shaping how I showed up long before my career even began. As I reflected and asked myself when I first learned to make myself small, a scene came up. My subconscious brought it forward, and alongside it, I could hear myself saying something. I'm just an admin. Not once, I heard it multiple times echoing in my mind. The words appeared alongside memories from different memories in my career. Different rooms, different years, same phrase. I'm just an admin. I cringed when I heard it, and I cringe as I say it out loud. I remember saying it out loud too many times, and I could see how it showed up even when I didn't say it at all. In my posture, in my tone, and how little space I allowed myself to take. The message was always the same. It was making myself smaller. That phrase was just one expression of a larger pattern. A subtle but consistent way of downplaying my role, my impact, and my voice. It showed up in quieter ways too, staying silent in meetings, holding back ideas, questioning whether what I had to say mattered. Choosing restraint over contribution because underneath it all was a masked belief that I didn't know enough. Over the years, I heard this echoed again and again within the executive assistant community. The EAs were often seen as less than, less essential. Being surrounded by that message made it easier to normalize staying quiet, staying behind the scenes, and letting the work speak for itself. Over time, that way of showing up became familiar, something I absorbed without fully realizing it. What I observed a lot was in the high-tech world especially, value is often tied to engineering degrees, technical depth, and what is most visible. In that environment, it's easy for executive assistant role to be misunderstood or minimized. And yet, look at any company. Every CEO has an executive assistant. There's a reason for that. At the highest levels, executives rely on their executive assistants daily. Time is protected, complexity is managed, priorities are filtered, decisions are supported before issues ever surface. Executive assistants are trusted with sensitive information, discretion, and access, not just business matters, but often to the personal details of an executive's lives and family. That level of trust is earned through consistent judgment and reliability. The contradiction is clear. The role may be undervalued in perception, yet it remains indispensable in practice. The executive assistant role is misunderstood because much of its value is preventive, anticipatory. and invisible by design. No one sees all the work happening behind the scenes, the last minute changes, the curveballs, the issues handled before they ever become visible problem. Executives experience the outcome as seamless. Meetings happen, travel works, decisions land smoothly. What goes unseen is the marathon required to make it all look that way. The constant adjustments, the split second decisions, the coordination and foresight that allow everything to move without missing a beat. That's also why people who've never worked closely with a strong executive assistant struggle to understand the value. You can fully appreciate that level of support until you've experienced it. And once you have it, it's hard to imagine going back. When things work well, it's easy to assume they simply did. That's how the role becomes underestimated, not because it lacks impact, but because its greatest value stays out of sight. And yet, language like "I'm just an EA" persists. That belief didn't originate in the workplace. In my work as a hypnotherapist, I see this pattern often. Because so much of life is spent at work, it becomes the place where long held patterns and beliefs are mirrored most clearly, often running on autopilot without being recognized. For many people, worth becomes tied to performance early on because that's how recognition, approval, and love were received from parents or authority figures. Being helpful, reliable, and needed became the way needs were met. Over time, that belief quietly shapes how hard we work and what we tolerate, especially in environments where approval still feels earned. Understanding this doesn't excuse organizational blind spot, it explains why certain patterns persist. What finally became clear wasn't just why I reacted so strongly when I felt my value was questioned. It was where that reaction came from. For years, I felt frustration when I was undervalued at work. It showed up through comments, behaviors on how the EA role was positioned and compensated. I thought I was reacting to the workplace. I wasn't. What I was reacting to was much older. The belief that I had to become valuable to be chosen was still running the show. Work simply gave it a stage. Being undervalued felt really personal because it echoed the first place where I felt unwanted. Seeing that changed everything. Now that I understand it, I no longer allow that old belief to take over. I can respond from clarity instead of trying to prove my worth. I'm taking my power back. Awareness begins with different questions. Why can't I see my value? What part of me learned to connect worth with performance? How has that belief shaped the way I work, give, and stay? These questions reveal the pattern beneath the behavior. And once a belief is visible, it can be understood and reshaped. From that awareness, you begin to choose differently. And your behavior changes because you're no longer operating on autopilot. Seeing the pattern is powerful. Living it after you see it is exhausting. Once you recognize how long held beliefs shape your reactions, your overworking, and what you tolerate, staying in the same cycle carries a cost. This is the work I do. I help people uncover where these beliefs form, understand the role they once played, and shift them so they no longer run the show. When the belief shifts, behavior follows. If this episode surfaced something familiar and you feel ready to address it at the root, the next step is a discovery call. This is focused conversation to explore what's showing up for you and determine whether this work is the right fit. This is not for everyone, but if you're done questioning your value through someone else's lens, now is the time to act. You can schedule your discovery call through the link in the show notes. Thank you for staying until the end. If this resonated with you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if someone came to mind while you're listening, share this episode with them. I see you, and you are more valuable than what you may have been taught to believe. I'll see you next week on Breakthrough Weekly.